Imagine being chosen by God for a dangerous assignment that could cost you your life. Imagine standing at the verge of your enormous mission when a voice comes out of the stillness, a seductive lure calls, and you select a path that changes your journey forever. Once, a prophet stood before a monarch to preach the truth amid idolatry and corruption. This messenger delivered a spiritual message no one would question. Amazingly, that prophet, once solid in his objective, gets deceived. His fate is sealed with a single lie and a little delay. He faces heavenly edict and the high cost of resistance in his story of bravery and grief. It reminds us of how easily we can be misled, the significance of sticking to our beliefs, and the serious consequences of deviating from divine instruction. We wonder what became of this revered prophet. What can we learn from his unfortunate choice? Watch for significant lessons that resonate today. He was a divinely selected herald with a unique purpose. He was summoned to face King Jeroboam, whose actions had driven Israel into idolatry. At that moment, the world was on their shoulders. In a time of immense turmoil, the Almighty ordered his chosen messenger to courageously confront the king's crimes, remain faithful in his beliefs, and announce a powerful warning of divine judgment that would shake the kingdom. Their path would be difficult. A trip of danger, allure, and tribulations would test his bravery and loyalty. This lowly Judah man was low status. His name and ancestry were not immortalized. He was not wealthy or famous. He carried a supernatural word that others would not share as a humble servant. He kept his faith and concentrated on the spiritual journey ahead. As people fell from morality, he was called to be the sole pillar of truth. Israel was deeply divided and unrestful in those days. Israel rose in the north and Judah in the south after King Solomon's death. Jeroboam, a restless man, ruled the 10 northern tribes during a time of considerable turmoil. His rule was hampered by fear and uncertainty. He made a fateful decision that changed the nation. He worried that if his people kept going to Jerusalem in Judah for worship, they might abandon him and join the southern kingdom. Jeroboam constructed golden calves in Bethel and Dan and commanded the people to worship them as gods in order to retain his rule. He built altars, recruited priests from outside Levi, and changed true worship of the Almighty into something unrecognizable. Corruption became darker with time. As time went on, the people got enchanted by false deities, and the nation strayed from the proper path. In the midst of this spiritual darkness, the Lord called a Judah prophet for a special purpose. He delivered a supernatural message to Jeroboam, warning him of the judgment if he did not repent and return to the Lord. A risky act was needed. The prophet's speech was both a rebuke and a solemn warning that may change history. However, the mission was more than words. The Almighty told the prophet, "Do not eat, do not drink, and do not return by the same way you came." These simple instructions tested the prophet's faithfulness. They told him to stay firm against the people's idolatrous habits without succumbing. He had to give the divine message and leave quickly to avoid temptation. Israel was meant to hear and grasp this message, not only Jeroboam. The prophet was the last chance, a supernatural messenger sent to awaken the people from their indifference and lead them back to true worship. His obedience mattered. Every move he made was watched by Israel and powers beyond his comprehension. This journey was unique. This spiritual quest would test his bravery, faith, and determination in the face of danger. Judea's emissary realized the gravity of the situation. He knew the risks, but he kept going. He left Judah determined to explore the unknown, knowing the Lord was with him. He took every step in trust, knowing he could not fail. He was ready for any challenge. Israel's and the kingdom's destiny was uncertain. He headed out to share the divine message, aware of the sacrifice of his fidelity. After Solomon's death, Israel separated into two kingdoms. Jeroboam led Israel to the north, while David's family ruled Judah to the south. This spiritual separation marked a major departure from divine commandments, not just politics. Jeroboam, selected by God to govern Israel, worried about his people's faithfulness to Judah's Davidic line. He worried that if they kept going to Jerusalem to pray at the temple, they might join Judah and overthrow him. Jeroboam made a desperate and wicked decision out of fear and uncertainty. He placed 2 golden calves in Bethel and Dan to prevent his people from going to Judah. He taught people to worship these golden calves as God. He declared, "Behold your gods, O Israel, who led you from the land of Egypt." Jeroboam went farther to mold his realm's spiritual customs. Including non-Levite priests, he chose priests from all tribes. He created his own holy feasts, like Judah's. This conduct disrupted Israel's dedication and distorted their relationship with God. As the king led them astray, the people were seduced and eventually welcomed this perverted loyalty. What began as a political move became a spiritual journey. In times of severe turbulence, the children of Israel, who had previously stood united in faith and reverence for the Almighty, now worshipped false idols and followed a monarch who had deserted the sacred commandments of their Creator. The Judah prophet arrives during a time of idolatry and spiritual decline. Despite his anonymity, his message is clear and urgent: to rebuke Bethel's idolatry and deliver God's punishment to King Jeroboam. He was not just criticizing the king, but also calling for people to worship the one true God. In an evil and rebellious nation, the prophet was a beacon of righteousness. He brought the final message of wisdom and warning, announcing divine judgment. This prophet was fearless. He knew delivering such a message to the monarch would endanger his life. Jeroboam had shown he would deal harshly against those who threatened his rule. Despite fear and violence, the messenger persisted. He persevered to accomplish his heavenly calling, despite the costs. His trek was both physical and spiritual, a brave fight against Israel's subtle corruption and idolatry. The prophet entered Bethel at the opportune time. Jeroboam prepared to burn incense on his golden calf's altar in a bold act of disobedience. The throng watched their ruler perform this illegal act of respect. Despite the ceremony's complexity, a brave Judah prophet stood firm. He declared a vision that shook Jeroboam's kingdom. He predicted that Josiah, a Davidic son, would violate the altar and destroy the idols. The prophet performed a miracle to prove his words came from God. He predicted that the altar would collapse and the offering ashes would scatter. As the prophet predicted, the altar split apart and ashes streamed out. The crowd was shocked, and Jeroboam's pride turned to wrath. He stretched out to seize the prophet, but his hand withered before he could speak. This amazing moment was a divine proclamation. Jeroboam's hand, which disobeyed the Lord, was paralyzed, but the prophets remained unaffected. It was a striking demonstration of divine power and a grave caution to the monarch. In humility and desperation, Jeroboam begged the prophet to pray for his hand's cure. In divine mercy, the prophet prayed, and Jeroboam's hand was miraculously cured. In the face of such a miraculous display of God's power, Jeroboam persisted. He refused to believe the prophet's words and remained idolatrous. Instead, he invited the prophet to his vast castle with generous hospitality and rewards. The divinely committed messenger refused to submit. He remembered the Almighty's command to abstain from eating, drinking, and retracing his steps, and resisted the king's temptations. The prophet arrived at Bethel at a crucial point in the drama. The city buzzed with idol worship and electric tension. King Jeroboam had organized a massive religious gathering out of passion. The audience surrounded the altar with reverence, believing they were experiencing a sacred moment. Yet it was a skewed reflection of actual devotion. Golden calves arose majestically, symbolizing the nation's worship. Jeroboam considered offering incense on the altar a religious deed, feeling proud. Despite his claims, the truth was different. The altar was decorated, the incense drifted, and the worship echoed. Yet all were a facade to sustain his dominion rather than honor the Almighty. The prophet stormed onto the stage, commanding respect. Despite the king's splendor, he entered the assembly with command. He confidently announced that a scion of David will be born and that hallowed shrine would be desecrated. On that sacred site, the priests who cared for the golden calves of Jeroboam would die. His voice shattered the silence that had followed the king's actions. However, the Lord's messenger continued. His warnings were profound. His supernatural inspiration was confirmed by a sign. He declared, "Lo and behold, the altar shall be rent asunder, and the ashes shall flow forth." The crowd stopped, enthralled. The monarch, enthroned and confident, was completely unprepared when a surprise twist occurred. Jeroboam, furious at being questioned, raised his hand and ordered the prophet's capture. However, an unexpected thing occurred while he traveled. In anger, he stretched out, but a heavenly intervention immobilized it. Frozen, it wilted. The once mighty monarch was stripped of all authority, his body a witness to the futility of defying the divine will, as the hand that strove to dominate the messenger of God lay weak and powerless. The crowd gasped, eyes wide with astonishment. They saw the divine's immediate and profound response, not simply a king's rage. Jeroboam's pride was shown in that spiritual moment. He believed he had discovered an incomprehensible enigma. His anger became fear. In desperation, the king kneeled before the prophet, praying for mercy and hand repair. This was a stark contrast to the king's previous rebellion. Jeroboam wanted to undo the physical consequences of his crime, to restore his control, not repent. The prophet prayed with compassion, and Jeroboam's hand was restored to its former splendor. Jeroboam refused to repent after this miracle. He approached the prophet with a proposal to gain his support, not with humility. His generosity brought warmth, wealth, and the comfort of the vast palace, as if friendliness could fix all. The prophet's steadfastness showed his love for God. He remembered being told to avoid eating, drinking, and retracing his steps. He declined the king's offer. He remained unimpressed by palace treasures or the king's company. No matter how tempting, the messenger knew that loyalty to the divine needed unwavering strength against temptation. The prophet refused to compromise his integrity for Jeroboam's temptations, since the heavenly word was priceless. With a sorrowful heart, the prophet turned and left Bethel. He bravely and steadfastly delivered the divine message as instructed by God. However, his departure caused pain. The messenger knew his journey was far from over. He shared wisdom, but was very aware of temptation. He didn't realize his path was still unfolding, and his greatest loyalty test was ahead. The Judah prophet returned home after performing his holy duty in Bethel, following the Lord's command. He was told to stop eating, drinking, and retracing his steps. These seemingly insignificant elements formed a vast tapestry to test his faithfulness and uphold his righteousness. He saw a miraculous sign confirming God's dominion after sharing a serious message with King Jeroboam about his idolatry. The altar split in two, and Jeroboam's hand froze, but the prophet prayed and repaired it. The prophet felt celestial approval and realized his mission had been fulfilled in that hallowed moment. As he gained clarity about his purpose and the amazing indications he had seen, he found himself at a crucial juncture. As he left Bethel, the prophet was determined to do God's will. Every move was deliberate, and every choice was well considered. True devotion to the divine meant upholding every instruction, regardless of size or apparent importance, not only conveying a message. The journey ahead required our total concentration and devotion at this moment. He was in dangerous territories, surrounded by a wicked atmosphere that had abandoned the Lord of Israel. In a time of intense unrest, King Jeroboam erected golden calves that led the people into idol worship. The prophet was obligated to expose this sin and call people to repent. As he traveled from Bethel, he saw that even the tiniest deviation from the Almighty's path could have severe results. On that peaceful stroll, the prophet met an older Bethel prophet. In the past, the seasoned prophet became curious about the young prophet's deeds. The story does not explain why the old prophet came. Perhaps the seasoned prophet was attracted by the young man's bravery, or perhaps envy lingered. He wanted to meet the man who had presented such a meaningful message after hearing about the miracles. The altar that split, Jeroboam's hand, healed. The old prophet deceived the man from Judah for reasons that remain unclear. Initially, the Judah messenger approached carefully. He knew the heavenly command and was determined to obey. The old prophet's comments were powerful and persuasive. He said a divine messenger told him the young prophet would return to Bethel with him. The Judah prophet pondered his next move in hesitation. In his heart, he heard the divine whisper to leave and not return. However, the suggestion of an angel, a heavenly messenger, sowed suspicion. At that pivotal moment, he made a significant error. He relaxed his vigilance. He knew that if an angel had conveyed a message, the instructions must have changed. Thus, the story ends in sorrow. The Judah messenger returned to Bethel with the senior prophet after hearing his words. In a moment of weakness, he let another's whisper drown out the Almighty's command. He had no idea that this was a divine test of his obedience, discernment, and confidence. Deception caught him in his vulnerable state, forcing him to fail a test with terrible consequences. The prophet from Judah certainly felt relieved and satisfied as they ate together, knowing that the situation had been resolved peacefully. But the peace didn't last long. After misguiding him, the ancient prophet warned him that he would die on the way home and not rest with his ancestors because he had disobeyed the Lord. The words struck the heart, and the Judah envoy must have felt a wave of amazement and anguish. How did he fall into this trap? The divine decree arrived quickly and surely. His fate was sealed by his decision to ignore the Almighty's summons and follow a misleading whisper. A fundamental lesson is learned in that poignant time, touching us deeply. It takes everyday determination to follow the Lord's path. In Judah, a prophet with a powerful message was chosen for a sacred task after witnessing divine force in all its majesty. In that crucial moment of struggle, he succumbed to another's whisper. He posed a threat to all of us. Many voices rise in this wide world, some compelling and seeming to mimic divine design. However, not all voices are trustworthy. The prophet from Judah should have sought divine confirmation when given an alternative instruction, not ignored a new one. That tragic disobedience cost him everything. The lion that killed the man but spared the donkey was a sign from heaven. It was a heavenly mandate, a stark reminder that sinning would have repercussions. The aging prophet would return to bury the Judah man in intense grief, realizing his grave mistake. For the Judah messenger, the hour was past. His choice had shaped his fate, and it was unchangeable. This story emphasizes the necessity of listening to God. Despite numerous voices trying to persuade us, we must stand fast to the Almighty's truths. His directives are important, and even a minor deviation might have fatal consequences. The story of the Judah prophet reminds us that the Lord's word is absolute, and that true faithfulness comes from obeying. The prophet from Judah returned home, carrying the heavy burden of his mission, unknowing of the dangers ahead. Having kept sharing the divine word, he found himself alone on a path that would test his faithfulness in ways he never imagined. He had obeyed the heavenly instruction with firm trust. Therefore, the air was dense with silence. However, temptations masquerading as virtue can cause even the most steadfast Christians to stumble. Behold the ancient prophet, whose motives are as enigmatic as desert breezes. After hearing about the young man from Judah, the aged prophet was filled with awe and possibly a deeper desire. Could it have been envy, a desire to be chosen for such a sacred mission, or a desire to create his own place in an era when the word of the Almighty was desperately sought after? A spark within him prompted him to seek out the Judah prophet. The prophet's life was forever changed by this interaction. The experienced prophet approached the young man, claiming kinship and a shared journey. He warmly embraced him, giving shelter from the sun, sustenance for the journey, and, most dangerously, a message that resonated with heavenly authority. He told the young prophet about a heavenly visitation and said he was ordered to welcome him back to Bethel for food and rest. In a moment of doubt, the young prophet missed the danger. He trusted the elder's words, believing the divine had whispered to him. His defenses collapsed. Clever, deceptive temptation. It was a subtle and misleading influence that appeared to fit with the heavenly aim, but was actually a lie disguised as virtue. Suddenly, the young prophet found himself at a crucial juncture. He followed the old prophet against divine guidance, which was disastrous. He returned to Bethel, torn between divine instruction and the allure of camaraderie and comfort. This horrible mistake would affect everything. In that terrible time, the prophet from Judah succumbed to misleading reassurances and ignored God's clear command. He trusted another's voice, but he ignored the hallowed call that had launched him on this trip from the start. This was no minor mistake. It was defiance. As the prophet ate and rested in the elder prophet's home, his decision's consequences became apparent. As he finished his lunch, the heavens spoke, and the prophet, who had tempted him to disobey, announced divine judgment. The Lord sent the aged prophet a message chastising the Judah man for his disobedience. In a tragic narrative, the prophet would die on his return journey, dishonoring his kin by not resting with his ancestors. In the twilight of his choice, the prophet from Judah realized the gravity of his actions. He climbed on his donkey, heavy with his errant decisions, but the journey back to Judah had changed in ways he could not predict. As he traveled, the decree was followed. A lion appeared and killed him, but it did not eat him. Instead, it sat alongside his lifeless body, watching over him. In its odd behavior, the lion did not attack or injure the donkey, sending a powerful message to those who doubted the divine decree. It was like a sacred story, showing God's promises fulfilled and showing that even the smallest disobedience will have consequences. The prophet's tragic destiny reminded Bethel's residents and all who listen that no one can bargain with or change God's commands, no matter their status or influence. Leaving the road is difficult, and disobeying or twisting the divine message can have enduring effects. In his ordeal, the prophet struggled to distinguish between the Almighty's call and a deceitful whisper that tried to mislead him. The deception was strong because it seemed so real. In his last moments, the aging prophet contemplated his choices and their consequences. He grieved when he buried the prophet from Judah in his own tomb, grieving his role in the prophet's death, despite his noble intentions. The elderly prophet's anguish showed that even deceivers can discover the truth, though often too late. A Judah prophet's story is a solemn reminder. It shows us that even the slightest deviation from God's will can have catastrophic consequences. Let us be cautious and wise, as the words we follow, whether from friends, authority, or heavenly messengers, should always be measured against the sacred precepts. Only through this journey can we faithfully follow the road of obedience and avoid the pitfalls of the unwary. Each action we make might move us closer or further from our divine calling on the narrow path of believing. After rejecting the king's hospitality, the prophet left Bethel with purpose. His mission was clear: to fight idolatry, proclaim judgment, and obey God. He courageously declared the divine message of judgment on Jeroboam's idolatrous behaviors and saw miraculous signs to prove it. The prophet's prayer miraculously recovered the king's withered and paralyzed hand. The altar was broken and its ashes scattered, a monument to the strong God he adored. The prophet traveled carefully back to Judah, aware of the gravity of the heavenly instruction he had to follow. Unbeknownst to him, his journey would lead to misery. He traveled confidently, but a disastrous meeting with a seasoned prophet would test his faithfulness and lead to severe consequences. An old prophet was curious and possibly envious of Bethel's amazing deeds. He seemed to have been caught in the shadows of heavenly destiny, as this unexpected visitor from Judah was entrusted with such a great mission. Why did God choose him? Could he not be a prophet? The aging prophet searched for the Judah man with intent. He knew about the miraculous signs, the cleft altar, the repaired hand, and the powerful words. As the old prophet came, he saw the prophet resting under a tree and approached with reverence. "Did Judah send you as a messenger?" he queried, validating what he was already aware of. The old prophet smiled quietly with satisfaction. His words aroused Israel's heart. However, the venerable prophet spoke words that changed destiny. He recounted an angelic revelation from God, pressing the Judah prophet to return with him. In an instant, the young prophet's pillars of determination shook. The ancient prophet confidently declared that the heavenly word had changed, revealing a new instruction from God. Angels, signs from above, gave the story legitimacy. In Judah, the prophet paused. He recognized that the Lord had told him to leave immediately, not eat, drink, or look back. Behold, a fellow messenger of the Lord, a servant of God, claiming his heavenly assignment. Could he be trusted? Could God have changed his mind? The ingenious tactic caught the Judah prophet in his confusion. He returned with the aging prophet, abandoning his convictions. He was misled by the old prophet's deceitful command words. As they broke bread, the young prophet became engrossed in the warmth of the company, forgetting the divine command in a whisper. As the meal entered him, he felt a foreboding unease. When he was surprised, the heavenly admonition hit him hard. The ancient prophet disclosed his true self with a sorrowful heart. He warned the prophet from Judah that he would die on his way home, since he had disobeyed God. The young prophet felt this declaration weigh him down. He received a serious warning. He was guided precisely. In a moment of doubt, he followed a different voice instead of the Almighty. The consequences were immediate and irreversible. The prophet from Judah realized his disobedience as he rode his donkey again. A lion appeared on the path and killed him instantly. The lion did not eat the body. It waited by the roadside, eerie and peaceful. The donkey stood uninjured alongside the prophet's corpse. All who witnessed this mysterious and beautiful occurrence were moved. They were moved by the message then. Even nature proved God's judgment had been fulfilled. After receiving the sad news, the old prophet traveled to see his own misfortune. He felt sad and regretful when he saw the still living prophet from Judah. In weeping, the aging prophet carried the lifeless body back to Bethel and buried it in his tomb, mindful of his role in the prophet's awful fate. He asked to be buried next to the prophet as a sign of contrition and recognition of the holiness of the calling he had so severely violated in moments of vulnerability or doubt. This story emphasizes the significance of being true to the divine, even when tempted by others. Hearing God's message is just the beginning. We must constantly check if it matches His everlasting truth. In this age of constant information and various perspectives, it may be difficult to stay focused on the holy path. As you contemplate this story, ask yourself, how often do other voices influence my choices? Do I stick to my beliefs or give in to easier options? Pause to consider your faith, your adherence to the teachings, and your capacity to resist temptation. This story should inspire you to keep going on your chosen path, remembering that true dedication requires hearing and living the divine purpose. Discuss these topics, examine your beliefs, and seek truth in the chaos. May this tale inspire you to be loyal and righteous.